As a kid, I loved games, not sports or anything. I hated going outside, honestly, I still do. But I love games. You know those sleepover games like Bloody Mary, Three Kings, Charlie Charlie? I was obsessed. I invited friends over all the time to play these creepy games. Everyone else chickened out at least once, but not me. I was brave. I never screamed when the Ouija board answered. I didn't flinch during concentrate. I wanted to get scared, but I never did. One night, it worked. It wasn't me who found the game this time. For the sake of anonymity, I'll call her Anne. We were at her birthday party, hanging out in her basement, sitting on bedrolls, talking, laughing, eating junk food. It was the kind of night I'd always dreamed of, but it was the last time I'd ever feel happy. Around 11 p.m., Anne came downstairs with a bag of chips. She had a sparkle in her eye, the look I knew well. She had a new game for us. "Have you guys ever played The Witch and the Maid?" she asked, setting the chips down. I snorted. "What kind of name is that?" "Seriously, it's really cool. We should play it," Anne said, eager. We gathered around, curious. Anne explained the rules. It required at least 2 people, and it was better if they were women. One person was the witch, the other the maid. The witch covered the maid's ears and confessed a secret out loud. The maid would only hear certain syllables, but those syllables were the name of a demon. Anne described the game's stakes. The more syllables you hear, the less time you have to live. 1 syllable equaled 1,000,000 steps. The more you heard, the closer you got to death. It was meant to be creepy, and it worked on me. I wasn't scared, though. I thought it was just some science trick. The wind, hallucinations. I was ready for it. I volunteered to go first. Anne covered my ears, and I waited for the secret to start. At first, I heard nothing. Then a single syllable. Ta. It sounded too clear, but I didn't think much of it. I let it go. But then I heard more. Wa, then kai. Si, die. I sat up, confused. This was getting real. 5 syllables, I said when Anne removed her hands from my ears. Anne grinned, thrilled. The other girls took their turns, and everyone was counting syllables and joking around. But when it came time for Anne to go, I felt an uneasy shift. I covered her ears and started sharing my secret, a silly story from when I was younger. But then, as I spoke, something felt wrong. The words that came out didn't sound like me. The syllables came out twisted and strange. I wasn't saying them right. It hit me. This wasn't a joke anymore. I tried to stop, but it was too late. Anne was laughing, but I was genuinely scared. When she stood up and took a step, I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. And then she spit up blood. It happened fast. In seconds, blood poured out of her mouth, drenching us all. Everyone panicked, running upstairs, but it was too late for most. One girl with 20 steps barely made it to the stairs before her steps ran out, and she fell. Another with 50 steps barely made it outside before she collapsed. Anne's mother was covered in blood, and she didn't even know what was happening. As for me, I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by fear, blood everywhere, and I couldn't walk. When the cops found me, I was on the floor, crying, covered in blood, refusing to take a step. They said it was shock, but I knew the truth. 20 years have passed since that night. In that time, I've taken 18 accidental steps, but I've been avoiding walking as much as I can. I've learned to live with the fear. But there's one thing I can't escape. The fear still lingers. And now I don't know how much longer I can go on. Consider this a suicide note. I don't have anyone to miss me. I just hope my legs can still support me when I take that final step. But before I go, you have to promise me something. Count your steps. I don't need help so badly that this story's an easy read. If you're struggling with something like Clara, this may not be the tale you want to hear. Maybe head over to Wholesome Memes. But if you're still here, I'm sharing a story that feels like a painful truth. I was hoping I'd be writing a different kind of post, one filled with joy about finding the love of my life after years of mistakes. But Clara's different. She's tall, with a gap-toothed smile, and she made homemade pasta every Friday night. She's someone who could sing tenor and read 2 books a week while making time for the small things, like changing in the bathroom to avoid being watched. Yet Clara's reality was darker than I could ever expect. She's been hearing voices for years, but most of them were kind, offering her advice, soothing her worries. But sometimes I'd catch her in the sunroom, still, listening to those voices. It was strange, but it didn't seem to bother her. She claimed she didn't hear them anymore, but I had my doubts. Our life together felt magical, even ordinary in a beautiful way. Clara and I connected over our mutual love for Harry Potter and horror movies. We both lost our dads when we were young and shared similar experiences growing up. We even shared mornings reading cooking blogs over breakfast. Then Annabelle came into the picture. I had hoped this would be the night I'd finally stop lying about my virginity. Annabelle was different. She had a nose piercing and smoked, and I was nervous yet excited. We met at a bookstore, but things went terribly wrong the moment I surprised her by lifting her into the air. Clara saw and screamed. She punched me in the face, furious with me. I apologized again and again, but Clara seemed to look past it. I offered her a coffee and we sat down, talking about everything from our past losses to our shared interests. We clicked, and Annabelle disappeared, blocking me the next day. 3 years later, Clara and I were married, and I lost my virginity to her. Our relationship had its own rhythm, including shooting at the firing range. Clara was an expert shot, and I was terrible, but we had fun. There was a warmth in how we encouraged each other, despite our differences. Then one night, Clara told me something important. It was 6 months in, and she opened up to me about her past, how she had been adopted and had a troubled childhood. Her birth mother had tried to end her life, and Clara was saved by a teacher. She was placed in a loving Mormon home and raised with kindness, but the scars remained. Clara shared that her mental health struggles included hearing voices, like her birth mother, who had schizophrenia. I didn't know what to say. I tried to reassure her, telling her that it didn't matter to me. We were in this together. A few months later, we talked about starting a family. Clara had always said she wanted to wait until she was 30. We were planning for the future, and she was open about the possibility of IVF or adoption if things didn't go according to plan. But then came the scare. Clara didn't feel ready. She needed more time for herself, time for her career and dreams before we settled down. Eventually, Clara switched birth control, and her body began changing. She gained weight, and it bothered me. I didn't understand at first, but I tried to support her, buying her gifts and trying to show I cared. But her weight continued to increase, and I didn't know how to handle it. One day I realized that something was wrong. Clara had been eating less, barely touching her meals and tracking her calories obsessively. She was slipping into unhealthy habits, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. She was only eating 1,300 calories a day, and I was scared for her. She brushed it off, saying that it wasn't a problem, but I couldn't help but worry. Eventually, I forced a conversation with her. Clara seemed defensive, but I pointed out that this wasn't healthy. I begged her to go see a doctor. She refused, saying she had it under control, but the changes in her body were becoming impossible to ignore. I could see the weight loss, the hollowness in her face. Still, she kept up the appearance that she was fine, refusing to acknowledge that anything was wrong. I took action. I spoke to friends and professionals about what I could do to help. I considered getting Clara involuntarily admitted to a facility if it came to that. I could see her spiraling, but she didn't want help. It was like she had turned inward, refusing to accept the truth. One night, Clara refused to eat the meal I made her, and I realized how much things had changed. Our routine, once full of shared meals and laughter, had become a battleground. I tried again and again to make things right, but every attempt seemed to fall short. Clara had become someone else, someone consumed by the need to control her body. In the end, I found Clara in the pantry, eating something in secret. She had cut herself open with a knife, trying to eat in a way that didn't count. It was the first time I fully understood how deep her struggle went. "I was just so hungry," she said between bites. "I figured this way, the calories don't count." I couldn't save her, not the way I thought I could, but I would keep trying, even if it meant I was losing her. In 1989, an unusual call echoed from the depths of the ocean. It was faint, distant, and unlike anything we had ever heard. At first, we thought it might be a malfunctioning hydrophone, but as the years went on, the strange sound persisted. In 1990 and again in 1991, we heard it again, a cry that could only be described as lonely. Measuring at a frequency of 52 hertz, the sound was too high-pitched for any known species of whale. This creature was destined to exist alone, earning the name Blue 52, the loneliest whale in the world. For years, we heard this lonesome cry, recorded through hydrophones along the west coast of America and Canada. But it wasn't until 2019 that we finally set out to find him. On board the RV Song of Solitude, our crew was determined to track down the whale that had been heard but never seen. We spent weeks scouring the North Pacific, and as technology advanced, the task of tracking became easier. Each day brought us closer to our goal, and the anticipation built. Rita, my colleague, often wondered, "Do you think he knows that there might be others like him out there?" It was a fair question. This whale's voice had always been different. It called out, but it never met another. The lonely song seemed to speak of a search, a desire for connection, for family. Rita's words lingered in my mind. 40 years alone, just looking for someone else. Finally, in late summer of 2019, we found him. An 80-foot-long whale rising from the depths for air. He had a stunning blue color, and his body resembled that of a fin whale. Our theory of a hybrid species was confirmed, and despite his solitary existence, he looked healthy. Rita was thrilled. "He's magnificent," she exclaimed. We tagged him with a tracker and spent the next few weeks following him, hoping to find others like him. Yet no other whales appeared. Every time he surfaced, we marked it, watched it, and wondered if he would ever find company. During one of those long, quiet nights, Rita mentioned, "He looks so sad." I asked, "How can you tell?" Her response was simple, "I just feel it. Poor Eros." That's when we decided to name him, for he was ours to care for, the closest thing to family he might ever have. But the more we spent time with Eros, the more Rita's obsession grew. She barely slept, fearing we might lose him. The isolation of the whale and his inability to find another seemed to weigh on her as much as it did on me. Then one night, everything changed. Rita shook me awake with a huge smile. "There's another whale." We rushed to the control room, and sure enough, the hydrophones picked up two distinct sources of sound. Eros had company. For the first time, we were hearing more than one song. The joy was palpable. "I knew Eros wasn't alone," Rita shouted. We believed we had found something special, a potential new subspecies of whale. But as we tried to track this new whale, the situation turned tense. The sonar picked up something larger than Eros, but it wasn't coming to the surface. A new mystery unfolded beneath us. Hours passed, and then something even stranger occurred. More songs, more calls, until the hydrophones were overwhelmed with sound. There was a pod of them, creatures larger than any known species of whale. Frightened but fascinated, we decided to send down a submersible drone to see what we could find. What we discovered was not what we expected. Eros led us down to the depths, where we saw glowing, yellow orbs drifting in the water. They were not whales. These creatures were something else entirely. Massive, jellyfish-like beings covered in blisters and tendrils. They emitted the same haunting song that Eros had called out. But they were unlike anything we had ever seen. As we processed this discovery, tragedy struck. One of our crew members, Simon, inexplicably jumped into the water, drawn by the creatures. He was lost before we could react. The situation became even more dangerous as the creatures began to approach our ship. One of them attacked, pulling a crew member into the ocean, and then another followed. The ship was under siege. Captain Banks tried to fight back, but the creatures were relentless. The ship trembled violently, and I was thrown to the deck. It was chaos, until, in the midst of the destruction, Eros appeared. With the creatures closing in, Eros launched himself into the fray. He fought, his massive body leading the creatures away from the ship. It was a heroic act, but a tragic one. He was injured, blood trailing behind him as he swam away, keeping the monsters occupied. We seized the opportunity and fled, heading back toward the coast. The creatures didn't follow, but the horror of what we had witnessed stayed with us. By the time we made contact with the mainland, the crew had been decimated. Eros had saved me, but I didn't know if he had survived the encounter. What I did know was that something was awakening from the depths, something dark and terrifying. Recent hydrophone recordings indicate that the creatures are spreading, moving further out across the Pacific. The seas are no longer safe, and no one knows how to stop them. As for me, I've returned home, but I can still hear them. Their songs echo in my mind, and I fear they are calling for me. The question is, how much longer can I resist?